Hello and welcome back to Round the Table. My name is Ben John. It's a joy to be with you again this week for this week's episode of Round the Table. It's always a joy to be with you and hear your comments, your concerns, your questions. So do post those in the comments. Love hearing, seeing where you guys are from. Great to see some of you already tuning in live. Hi Vanessa, great to hear from you. Great to have your thoughts comment in the discussion on pornography later. I'm delighted to be joined by Andrea Williams and Tim Dieppe. Hi Andrea, hi Tim. Great to have you both with us. And we're going to be thinking through some of the things that have been happening in this last week and how as Christians we can be responding. Last week on Round the Table, we spoke in the break, in the middle of the House of Lords debate on conversion therapy. Tim, tell us how that ended up happening.
Well, it was a remarkable debate, actually. Baroness Burt had a private member's bill on conversion therapy, and the massive preponderance of speeches were against the bill. Something like 29 against the bill as opposed to 15 for the bill. And it was very, very clear that the argument, not just the numbers, but the argument was one in terms of we don't need a bill like this. And lots of people pointing out things like parents would be criminalized for refusing puberty blockers or refusing to allow children to cross-dress. Free speech would be massively hindered. Private consensual conversations could risk being criminalized, and just anything that's already illegal, violence and all these other things, coercion, pressure is already illegal anyway. So what are we actually legislating for? Why do we need legislation? People arguing clearly that we don't need new laws. In fact, it's dangerous to bring in a new law along these lines. And some very, very powerful speeches and criticism as well in the debate of the Scottish conversion therapy proposals, which are out for consultation at the moment as well, not just that particular bill. This particular bill was just very, very simple and bad. It just said any practice that purports to change or indeed suppress someone's gender identity or sexual orientation would be criminalized. And this could include like advice to abstain from sexual activity or something like that as well. Could be a criminal offense under this thing. So really encouraging to see so many peers speaking against it. And I think this marks a real shift in the culture, because not very long ago, very, very few politicians were prepared to say that they opposed banning conversion therapy. Conversion therapy was seen as such a toxic, horrible thing that who on earth would oppose a legal ban on it? But now we've had dozens of peers speak out in the House of Lords, and many other people besides as well, speaking out and saying we don't need this. There's no need for a new law like this. We shouldn't have a new law like this. And this is very encouraging. It's what we at Christian Concern have been saying all along, that no new laws are needed. And now more and more people are basically following our line and have come along with exactly the line that we are taking on it. No new laws are needed. Anything that is already physical, the government admits is already criminalized anyway. And all that a new law would do would actually criminalize certain conversations. And that was pointed out by members of the House of Lords, who clearly some of them have read some of the material that we've provided to them about it. So quite an encouraging moment, but the battle is not lost or not over, because there's another private member's bill, this time in the House of Commons, coming up for debates in early March. The final draft of that bill has still not been published, so there's a deliberate tactic to bring in the final publication of it at the very last minute for people to respond to. But that will be debated in the House of Commons. And the House of Commons is a different place to the House of Lords. And it'll be very interesting to see how many members of the House of Commons are prepared to stand up and say, we don't need any new laws like this. We don't need a new law like this.
But I think, Tim, even though they've not published it, the truth is this, these are false terms.
Oh, yes, of course.
So conversion therapy it's a false term, it's a forced term, it's a political term. There's no evidence, no one's been able to bring any evidence really anywhere that it exists, certainly not in the way that the activists say that it exists. Also, this whole idea of there needing to be banned under this term, this idea that there is violence and so on and so forth. Again, we know that any violence anywhere in any situation should be properly criminalised. So,
and it is criminalised. And it's prosecuted. They said that I think one of the things they mentioned in the House of Lords debate was that an FOI sent to police forces found that no offences in the last 5 years by any police force had ever been done in the name of conversion therapy.
Exactly. So I think that's. I mean, this is the way in which this whole the noise still in the cult, in the space, just in the conversation, is that this is the kind of thing that occurs. And one of the things that at least we saw in the House of Lords, that they'd considered the evidence, they'd actually thought about this properly, and they'd seen that what people say is happening doesn't really happening, that the language, the terms are all wrong, in fact. And I think this is something that we've got to keep on saying and keep on trying to unpack for people, because it's brilliant that those members of the House of Lords had understood it in the way that they had. But for a lot of the population out there, they still have this terrible imagery of what so-called conversion therapy is, when in fact there is no evidence of it. And in fact, what we have is something that's quite the opposite. We have these extraordinary and amazing stories of people who, through therapy or through becoming Christians, have moved away from relationships, behaviors, sexual so-called identities that have really hurt them and harmed them, and become free. And what that package of distortion does is it means that people that want help can't get the help that they need, and it also subdues those that are able to give help. So
Andrea, so you mentioned there's still a lot of work to do in reclaiming back the language, or just getting at undermining all these kind of false narratives that there are. But it does seem this debate that happened last Friday does seem to be a positive step in the right direction. Tim was saying people would have said opposing a conversion therapy ban would have been politically toxic just a few years ago. And to have 29
maybe
speeches,
even 2 years ago or 1 year ago, even.
Yes, is encouraging. So would you agree? Would you say you've seen that shift yourself? I mean, you've been speaking and fighting for quite a few years in trying to bring down these false narratives and these attacks.
The debate in the House of Lords was encouraging. And I know a number of members of the House of Lords, and I know that they have been on a journey to understand it. And so there's a sense in which we mustn't grow weary in this, because we have to keep on explaining it in the very simplest of terms to everyone all around us, including people in the church, including people including people everywhere. That freedom means we're free to change. That freedom means that we're free to access help for these identities that are these kind of false identities that are being imposed upon us by the culture, as if people can't change their sexual behaviors, or something that is often actually imposed upon them by the culture that we're living in.
Yeah, so I think. Certainly, no, I agree. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because even the bishops of Bristol and Guildford stood up in the House of Lords to speak and raised concerns about the wording of the bill. And, you say maybe only 2 years ago, I would have thought only a few months ago, I would have thought that wouldn't have happened. And because the Church of England's formal position is to call on the government to ban conversion therapy in the area of sexual orientation. And so it was interesting to see that these two bishops, with a briefing from the advisors to the bishops, got up to raise concerns about the wording of the bill. So that's a big shift as well. It's not just, you go back a few years and it's just ban conversion therapy, no nuances, no qualifications, no understanding about what the implications of that would be. And now there's a sense of, we need to be careful what we're banning. So I think a lot of people have probably...
it's this idea that your sexual orientation is fixed, like the color of the kind of sexual orientation label is a fixed and protected characteristic, and it's like the color of your skin, it's immutable. And so to try and convert someone from sexual orientation is as bad as trying to speak about that as if it were the color of their skin. It's like it's something that's deep, that's something that's innate, that's something that they are born with. And that false narrative is, we are getting through that is a false narrative at last. And we need to keep on. We're not fine.
And I think we're also getting through that it's criminalizing consensual conversations.
Yes.
That message has clearly got through. The Free Speech Union has been campaigning on this quite aggressively, and so has Sex Matters. What's changed, I think, as well in the last few years is secular organizations as well as Christian organizations have come on board and said, no, we shouldn't have any laws about this. That's a new thing. It was not very long ago. It was only Christian organizations like us that were speaking up about this, and not very many of us were doing that.
I think the shift as well, Tim. Sorry, on this is that, and I think, and again, so I thank God for the team and the work of Christian Concern, is that we've been very resolute and absolute from the beginning because of our work with groups such as Core Issues Trust and the International Federation for Therapeutic Counselling Choice. We've been very clear from the beginning that there has not been any need for a bill, that harmful practices they would either be bad therapy is bad therapy is bad therapy. The regulators regulate it. So that any therapy, criminal activity in whatever sphere that's violent or anything like that is illegal. So we always made the case clearly that there was no need for any bill. There was never any concession that in this one particular area, it was a particular area that needed particular legislation on, because the kind of fears that were being thrown out simply didn't exist in reality. We might hear anecdotal stories, but in fact, no hard evidence. We don't. That's that. And this, yes, tip Ben.
Yeah, and a lot of the big exposés are people who are pretending, they're lying. They seek out a counsellor and pretend, they're going to do a big undercover expose, and they find it hard. And sometimes I just think, well, I'd imagine going to a counsellor and lying, and perpetually would be hard and difficult. But we can give thanks that there seems to be a shift in the right direction, but we continue to contend, we continue to fight this Commons bill. We must oppose as well. We can't get complacent, but we must continue speaking carefully, boldly, courageously, clearly, and not let the culture dictate the terms. Andrea, there's continued again pushes for abortion decriminalisation. Tell us about the latest push.
Yes, Diane Johnson, who's an MP, she's proposing an amendment, I think, as many of you will already know, to the Criminal Justice Bill. And the wording of this amendment is that no offence is committed by a woman acting in relation to her own pregnancy. So this would, in effect, legalise abortion up to birth. So what you have here is, if a woman procures her own abortion, even if she takes pills beyond the 9 weeks and 6 days gestation, that she would not be liable to any criminal prosecution. So right now we are asking you at Christian Concern to write to your MPs and talk actually about the real danger that puts these women in fact, as well. The women will be in danger because they may well be having abortions much later than is safe for them physically. And we've seen many women, as a result of taking pills by post-abortions on their own, in their own homes. We've seen many more women being admitted to hospital. 1 in 17 women are actually ending up in hospital as a result of complications after taking abortion pills at home. So I think this is very serious indeed. But also the fact that it completely.
That's even taken them within the time limit, Andrew, isn't it? That's even within the 10 weeks.
That's within the 10 weeks.
Beyond that, then you're getting into much higher complications. Even the drug companies don't sign off. They don't say it's safe to use after 10 weeks. So why are we bringing in a law saying, oh, it's fine to take these tablets whenever you want? Right? It is unsafe. It's very, it's unsafe as it stands.
For women, of course, it's unsafe for the children. It's really petrifying. It's petrifying, isn't it? Really, it is.
It's unsafe anyway as it stands, even under the 10 weeks, as we've shown with these FOI requests. But it gets up to like multiples of that, 160 times that level of complications when you get to 20 weeks, for example, and stuff.
Yeah, so, and also we have uncovered, haven't we, Tim? Although it's been hard to prove, but we've uncovered deaths that are suspicious. And of course there are. It requires multiple layers of investigation to really join this all up. But we have seen, this increase in admissions to hospitals. We've seen deaths that have occurred after taking these pills in the hospitals. These are facts that we are living with right now. But I also just want us to imagine this for a minute. Is it kind for a society to say there's no sanction at all? We don't mind at all when a woman, because it's her body and her choice, chooses to have an abortion, she'll be sent these pills. Essentially, we're getting to a point where we just need access to pills like it's a paracetamol. This is her choice. Is it kind to have so diminished what pregnancy is, what the conception of a child is, the life of a child to this? But then also, is it kind to the woman to allow her to think that she can just take these pills as if they are of no consequence? And there she may be in her home, very often alone, because very often she is alone, because that's the reason why she's having an abortion, because she's not being supported by the father of the child, or she may be being coerced. The point is, can you imagine this? That alone, you take the pills and you abort the baby. You abort the baby alone.
And there's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of bleeding, very high risk
and the blood, and if it's
and so on, all of that.
And I'm pausing for a minute for us to really think about that, to really think about how serious this is, and the fact that, the push to legalize abortion came because the push was back then, women in hard circumstances go to backstreet abortions, and this kind of very dramatic language of coat hangers and this kind of stuff was going on. I have to say, if you look back at the records and you look back at medical records at the time, backstreet, they were not unsafe in the way that was being portrayed at that particular point, in order to put the political pressure on to liberalize the law. But what have we ended up in now? We've ended up in a place whereby all protection for the women and all protection for the child and all moral compass in terms of what we are doing is entirely being upended in our law. So we're actually going back to backstreet abortions. We're going back to a place whereby anytime, anyhow, a woman can go and get an abortion. There's no monitoring of it. There's no care. It's really quite disturbing. And it's because we've so diminished the value of life and the value of what our unborn children, but also our care for women in this circumstance, because we demean them when we say this is nothing. And so that is just massively serious for the whole of society. Remember, up until 1967, the law presumed the protection of life, all life, from the moment of conception to the point of natural death. An absolute legal, moral, ethical presumption, we protect life. The 1967 Act, so it would have been unthinkable to procure a miscarriage or to do an abortion before 1967 in our law. And then in 1967, the law says abortion is illegal unless the mum's life is at risk or the risk to physical or mental problems are greater if she continues with the pregnancy. And it's so serious, the abortion has to be so limited, so rare, that 2 doctors have to sign off on it. And from that law in 1967, that's still the law that's operational. We've got to a place where, in essence, we have abortion on demand. And now Diana Johnson and her cohort of radical, anti-life, campaigning MPs are ripping up all protections for women, all protections for life, and in fact endangering women.
I think that is striking, that we've all this idea about this is all empowering women, this is all pro-women, and actually there is no care for women, there is no care. I thought that was striking what you said, Andrea. It is, in a sense, a return to backstreet abortions. And good to see some of these comments coming in. John Huggins, a baby's life is precious, amen. Ray Hamilton commenting about Andrea, so passionate about the protection of babies.
Oh, I'm sorry if I've been speaking loudly. I'm sorry about that if I've been speaking loudly. Don't need to be shouting.
No, you're not shouting, Andrea. You're passionate. I think that's one of the, sadly today, many of us aren't.
I think Michael Petek asked a question there about the drug companies.
We aren't caring for women.
Michael Petek's asking a question about the drug companies.
If a woman...
I think if the drug companies say...
Yes, great question. If a woman doesn't commit an offence in relation to...
Well, I think if the drug companies have said it's not safe after 10 weeks, then the drug companies are not liable. So they won't be liable for any problems because they have said only use this drug before 10 weeks of gestation. So I don't see at all how the drug companies can be liable under that system. Possibly somebody posting out the pills.
The nature of the proposed...
On what basis do they post out the pills? How do they know the gestational age, all that kind of thing? Possibly they could be at risk, but if it's decriminalised, I think that no one would be prosecuted for this.
I think it's frustrating because we've been raising these concerns for 4 years now, because we're coming up to the 4-year anniversary of going into lockdown, and when there was all of that double U-turn and backtracks and things like that. And the reality is everything that all these concerns about care for women, all these concerns about how bad this is, has all come to pass, and yet people aren't listening and are still trying to push forward with these amendments and these decriminalisations. So write to your MPs, encourage them to oppose these amendments, this amendment to the Criminal Justice Bill. We need to have a voice that cares for women, that's pro-life, that values the sanctity of life of the unborn child from conception. So do write to your MP to oppose this. Another thing that's happening at the moment is a call for evidence.
Sorry, I think there's a little bit of a delay, so I'm sorry about that. But I think that we do actually have a tool to help people write to their MPs on this. So if you haven't signed up to Christian Concern to receive our emails, please do that. But we do have a tool to help you to write to your MP on this particular matter. And the more of us that can do that, the better it will be, so that we can really try to ensure that this amendment, I would hope that it doesn't get put to a vote on, that it's deemed out with the remit of the Criminal Justice Bill. It really, for abortion to be decriminalised in this way, it's never meant to happen. It's like it's a trick. It's in a bill where it should never be. And we really have to seek to oppose this very fundamentally, just even as a matter of procedure, of parliamentary procedure. So please ensure that we do that. And I hope that in our action alert we put that point as well, that something as fundamental as this shouldn't be an add-on by way of an amendment to a bill that was not meant to deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
Back over to you, Ben.
I think Ben might have frozen actually there. Frustratingly enough. So yeah, no, do write to MP, and we've put up the guidance there. I can see that on the chat there, and let them know you want them to vote against that amendment when it comes up for vote. Should be coming up for vote sometime in the next 2 weeks. I think it's expected to be this month, so it should be coming up to vote sometime in the next 2 weeks. And then the other thing we're going to talk about today was pornography, actually, because the government has got a call for evidence out about pornography. And this is actually a good thing, because the government is actually thinking about the consequences of pornography and the damage it does to society and the issues around it. And they put out a call for evidence asking people, what do they think about how damaging pornography is? What do they think about it? What do they think? And particularly, they are asking for stories like, has pornography affected you? And in what way has it affected you? Has it affected somebody close to you, somebody in your house, somebody, a close relative, or something like that? And we think that many, many people watching this, and our supporters generally as well, will have stories about the damaging effects of pornography on yourself, or on a close relative, on a spouse, on a child, or something like that. We know that pornography is very, very harmful. It sexualizes people, it degrades people, it damages the way people relate to each other, makes it very hard to have long-term stable relationships, and it's addictive, and it just harms people in so many ways. So we really want the government to hear as many stories as possible about the harm that pornography has done in society. So they can see widespread evidence of it. They're wondering whether they should have more restrictions, whether they should have more particularly online restrictions of pornography and so on. Online pornography is still a relatively new thing. Certainly when I was growing up, you had to reach up into a top shelf and get a sort of, magazine hidden behind something. Now anybody with a computer or a laptop or a tablet or a phone can just access pornography at will. We know that people have accessed pornography in the House of Parliament, for example, the House of Commons, in their workplaces, as well as at home in their downtime. So it's so accessible, and we really want the government to try and make it not so accessible, if at all possible. So we're encouraging you, please share your stories about that. Ben, sorry we lost you there. Do you want to add anything to that about the pornography call for evidence?
Yeah. Well, they're having a call for evidence as they think about how they can regulate, legislate regarding pornography access and use. And they've asked for evidence from members of the public. And so I think it's an important opportunity for us to be able to share testimonies, share our own stories for those who've been affected by pornography. A Premier poll a couple of years ago showed that 30% of church leaders access porn on the internet more than once a month. 42% of Christian men have said that they have a porn addiction. 75% of Christian men view pornography on a monthly or less regular basis. And pornography affects women as well. And so clearly this is an issue, not just in the culture, but in the church as well. And I think one of the key things with this call for evidence is the opportunity to be able to describe and share about these harms, how it affects life, mind, character, but also how the accessibility of it, the average age at which children first see pornography is 13. And by the age of 9, 10% have seen pornography, 27% by the age of 11. And half of all children who'd seen pornography had seen it by the age of 13. And so pornography is rampant in our culture. It's accessible, it's addictive, it's powerful, but it's also wicked and evil. And so therefore, this is an opportunity to have a voice in this. Andrea, I know you've spoken before in the past about pornography. Why do you think it's important that the church speaks about pornography?
Well, I noted just in the comments here, I think from Canadian Anglican, she said, why do we as Christians feel we can force our views on others? Didn't we fight in World War II to stop such things? It's not so much about forcing our views on others to the lady who is the Canadian Anglican, but rather to say this, that God's laws are beautiful. God's laws work. God's laws are there to be contended for very clearly in the public space. His moral code, his moral virtue really is good for all. And, you know, if we don't legislate towards God, then we legislate against him. And that really harms society. And that's why, you know, Jesus Christ, his truth, it is political, it is public. And that's why we need to be contending unashamedly for his truth in the public space. And one of the areas, and we've got an opportunity to speak into that around all the three areas that we've spoken about today: conversion therapy, abortion, and pornography. And I think that one of the reasons why the church is unable to speak sometimes is because we're so steeped in our own brokenness. So if that premier poll about pornography in the church is even half true, I mean, even if the numbers are really frightening, but let's say we halve those numbers, it would be a really serious issue for the church. And what happens if we've got a secret sin within the church, if we're not sexually pure within the church, then how can we speak? How do we have the courage, the moral courage, to speak on abortion, to speak with regard to gay marriage, same-sex marriage? There's a sense in which we can't when this is actually the bigger problem. There's a bigger problem, and it's in our churches. I mean, what you said, Ben, about our children suffering, it's because pornography comes to them. That there's a sense in which by 9, we're told, boys are seeing pornography on their phone. Most boys. Well, that is
10% of boys. 10%.
10%. Sorry, 10% of boys. That is a very sobering figure. So we should be working as the church to ensure that we are keeping safe our children. We are porn-proofing them. And that we are, this is a massive education lesson that we need to be doing, because unless we do, we can't speak on all the other issues that we as a church need to speak about. So I think that the benefit of responding to this consultation is to tell the stories, to demonstrate to the government that porn is not some harmless recreational personal activity, but very often becomes something that's deeply devastating, secret, addictive, with a massive impact on families and communities. So I think that these are the things that we need to be speaking into government on, and we need as a church to be speaking to, and we need to have it very clearly we need to be clearly looking at programs to ensure in our churches to ensure that we keep safe our young people, and indeed men.
I think Mike Phillips did write an excellent article on how to get free of an addiction to pornography. So if you know somebody or you have that yourself, do look at that article. I'm sure my colleagues will put it up on the chat there. But again, if those stats are anything like true, then huge portions of the people watching this and of our supporters generally will have some personal experience of pornography and its effects in terms of on yourself or on someone close to you. And really, that's a great opportunity to share that experience with the government and to urge them to have greater restrictions on it and to make it much harder for people to access on their phones and on their tablets and so on, especially for children. We really want that. We want it to be very, very hard for children to access pornography if we possibly can, so that they're not exposed and have their sexuality damaged and sexual desires and lust damaged in that kind of way from a very, very young age. So do get involved, do share your story in that, and let the government listen to it and read it and hear all these stories.
Yeah, we've put our some guidance about how you can
about how to fill that in is in the comments. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Tim. Sorry, I've been a bit freezing and jumping around here and there on the my computer, but it's been really great to chat to you both, and it's been great to have you guys in the comments posting your comments and your questions. Seeing there's been a few little debates been going on, but it's been a delight to speak with you, engaging with these issues, and we'll be back next week on Round the Table.
And maybe just before we go, Ben, just in response to some of these chats, we've got the Canadian Anglican going, when will white Christians advocate for banning racism and so on and so forth? Well, this is the wonderful truth, isn't it? This is the wonderful truth that God created every one of us. He created our skin color, and this is just, and it's beautiful, and he made it, and he knows every one of us. And the most amazing thing for all of us is that Jesus can be known as our savior and as our friend. And he died on the cross for our sins. And he gives us the how now to live. And this cuts across all humanity and is there for every single one of us. And it's the most beautiful gift. And in the gospel is redemption, power, beauty, and the way to live. So there's nothing at all racist, bigoted about that. It's a free gift for all, the best gift ever. And that is why we wake up in the morning at Christian Concern to proclaim that gift to a watching and waiting and hurting world, to say this is the way to live in and through the love and the power and the forgiveness of Jesus, who is the Savior, the Lord, the King, the most beautiful person ever to have walked the planet. And for one day will come and judge us all. And one day every knee will bow to him. And I look forward to that day. So thanks everyone for coming and joining us today. Thanks, Ben, and thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Tim. Thank you.